Good day and welcome to this special ABSA Insight Series. I am your host, Fifi Peters. Despite lockdown levels in South Africa easing, the COVID-19 crisis did not lead to the traditional lipstick effect that has been witnessed in the past. The lipstick effect describes the theory of spending more on cheaper luxury goods that make one feel better about themselves in times of crisis. To discuss the change in consumer behavior and the latest trends that are driving spending, I'm joined by Isana Cordier, the head of consumer goods and services at ABSA Corporate and Investment Banking. Isana, thanks so much for your time. So has COVID-19 killed the lipstick effect then?
Well, Fifi, I think in a way it did. Although I think it looked a little bit different than what we used to. People did spend on different luxury items, but not necessarily lipstick or something that makes them look better. I think the biggest beneficiary of the spend has been home improvement and things like gaming and consoles for home entertainment.
Well, rest in peace to the lipstick and the makeups for now, I suppose, as we do have the focus on home improvement and also the entertainment value. Just in terms of that, I mean, I also took the opportunity to upgrade my home during the lockdown and also my entertainment suite. But how much further does demand in this space have to run?
Interestingly enough, if year to date, when we look at our data from January to May, end of May, home improvement and building is still up year on year, which tells me that people are keeping investing in their home areas as they have resources to do so, which again speaks about the work from home and the different lifestyle changes people has made to adapt to this new environment we're in. And although people are starting to go out more, work from home has become a semi-permanent trend, it seems, and is probably here to stay for the longer term.
Just talking about those trends, though, in the main, and what does stay and what doesn't. In terms of the migration to online, in which, of course, a lot of consumers spent a lot of their times behind their PCs, on their laptops, shopping as a result of not being able to go into the malls, and also perhaps as a result of trying to keep safe. Now that we are in a period where things are starting to open up a bit, notwithstanding the third wave currently that we are facing, but how much of the trends that we have witnessed in the past 12 months, particularly as it does pertain to online shopping, will stay, and how much of them will pass?
Fifi, I think it's here to stay. I think it will look different. I do think it's become more the omni-channel experience. I still think South Africa's retailers has quite a fair while to go when it comes to things like the last mile delivery and reaching every part of the South African economy. The demand is there. Logistically, I still believe we have a way to go to solve and reach our consumers effectively. Certainly, people I speak to on a day-to-day basis use things like 60/60 regularly and have enjoyed the experience and is continuing to look for more resources online to shop. So the demand is there. It's how we solve for it from a retail and logistics perspective, especially in all areas of our LSM markets.
Just as we talk about the consumer and the significance of the consumer in the broader economy, I appreciate what your research does try to argue in saying that government essentially needs to drive consumer behavior towards the necessary changes needed to accelerate the economy. And I was hoping that perhaps we could unpack that a little further as to practically what does driving consumer behavior towards the right channels look like?
Well, Fifi, if I consider what we've seen during COVID is that the realization that doesn't matter what we do, in the end, the consumer is the one that drives the trend or the change in behavior. Now, when we think about what we need our consumer to change to, for instance, we want them to start buying local. We want them to support our local manufacturing. That, in a sense, will create jobs which create demand for more jobs and more manufacturing capacity in the economy. So how do you change a consumer's behavior to start buying local? We have great campaigns running. We know that government has spent a lot of time on the master plans, working in the textile industry, specifically in clothing, who, by the way, has taken a very hard knock throughout last year, being a discretionary spend, having a change in category spending by our consumers. So how do we drive our consumer to buy local? And for me, the answer has to be in some sort of financial incentive. We have to give something to consumer to incentivize them to support the local economy. And the best is money back in the pocket. So just thinking out of the box here, but things like a tax rebate or reduced VAT for proper qualified South African produce, that is the things we need to start thinking of to truly impact the economy and the consumer and change the behavior we so desperately need in this economy.
And I actually like that idea, and I have found that it has, again, worked for quite a number of people in terms of motivating them to buy healthier food produce, knowing that at the end of the week, by making healthier decisions, you get that 200 or 300 Rand back in your pocket. What do you think then take up for or from the retail sector would be like to such an initiative, and perhaps what are some of the things that they'd have to bear in mind in trying to get such an initiative off the ground?
Well, I don't think it's only on the shoulders of the retail sector. I do think it has to be a collaboration between retailers, but also between retailers and government. Because effectively retailers are also struggling and finding it hard to up their and keep their margins and stay profitable. So for me, this is somewhere where the government and retailers need to take hands and say, how do we pass a little bit of benefit through the retailer to our end consumer? And that's why I reference tax, because that's normally the easiest way to get that done. And the longer term view obviously is, yes, you might lose a little bit in the tax, in the VAT, if we get a more stimulated economy, more manufacturing going. There's lots more tax for government to gain on a corporate level as well.
And I suppose logistically it wouldn't be too hard to get off the ground, given that we have seen a number of retailers of late and even in the recent past rolling out their customer store cards in which a consumer could simply swipe, and that is how you'd monitor the data on which purchases were local or not.
Yeah, and I think, a program where you have to qualify your products as truly South African and fully local, that such a program could be beneficial. If we have a buy local sign on an item, we know it's truly local and it's sourced South African from the cotton fields right through to the shelf. So you have a multiple supply chain there that could be uplifted in one product category. So that to me is where we need to start looking. And I'm just looking at clothing. It could be much broader in the farming, in the food communities. How do we incentivize our farmers also to produce more and produce fully local goods?
Isana, I'm sure you've been monitoring the economic data that has been coming out regarding the shape of the consumer, and what is standing out presently is the fact that the consumer is not in as bad form as was expected. So given the strength that we have seen in the first half of this year, what does it tell you about the state of the consumer for the remaining period of 2021?
I think in South Africa, we're sitting with a situation where our upper end consumers at the top are doing very well. They clearly are managing well, and wealth is not a problem. And at the lower end, I think our grants have kept our consumers afloat. I think our consumers have also gone and have been very creative in finding new avenues of making money. I think the hard hit part is in the middle. So we might see a shrinkage in the middle end consumer and have a bigger lower end consumer in the near term. It would be interesting, Fifi, to watch the next couple of months, because as the story unfolds and the grants are starting to run out and have been stopped, that's where I think we might start to see a different story on our consumer. But you also have to be very aware that driving in the streets, a lot of homeless people, people without jobs everywhere. So in my mind, there's no doubt that the consumer has been hit, and potentially we're just not seeing the real impact. Again, at the top end, I think we have a very resilient consumer, and the middle are certainly dropping down.
It is true. I mean, one cannot look at, for instance, the GDP figures without looking at the unemployment figures, which do show the plight of the consumer that you are referring to. Just a last question, Isana, in terms of where the retail opportunity is for our major retailers. I mean, you mentioned the possibility of having a bigger, lower income market, and I just wonder if that is where our major retailers should be looking to or shopping in a lot more to find growth.
Fifi, I think we've seen quite a lot of corporate activity already from our retailers, diversifying their businesses into different spaces. I mean, Mr. Price is a clear example. They bought the power fashion business that's really rural, a rural family-owned business traditionally, but they also bought into Yappie Chef, that's more on your upper end. So I think we're going to see a lot more of those diversification strategies from our retailers to ensure that they are reaching all ends of the LSM market and really diversify into the upper and lower LSM more actively. TFG has also bought Jet last year, which I think is also, again, positioning themselves better into the lower LSM space. Apart from that, I was quite impressed with the Clicks Pick n Pay collaboration and partnership that they formed with the pharmacies, because I think this speaks to me about another trend that I hope to see more in South Africa, where retailers start to collaborate more on their core strengths rather to try and solve for everything. Clicks are clearly a winner when it comes to the dispensary space, and Pick n Pay a winner when it comes to food and grocery retail. And I think the two is making an excellent partnership and leveraging their exposure to a much wider consumer base by doing that deal.
Isana, you highlight a very good point there, and I suppose we will both have to wait and see if that collaboration continues amongst other players who focus on their, or bringing together their core strengths, as it were. But that is where we leave it for this episode of ABSA Insights. That was Isana Cordier, who is the head of consumer goods and services at ABSA Corporate and Investment Banking. Until the next insight that we deliver to you, have yourselves a great rest of the day. Goodbye.